The first thing Ethan Cole saw when he reached the mountain cabin was blood on the snow. It wasn't fresh. It wasn't dramatic. Just a dark, rust-colored stain half buried under a thin crust of ice, as if the mountain itself had tried to swallow the memory. The wind howled across the ridge, rattling the wooden shutters of the old cabin he had just inherited, and beside him, his Belgian Malinois, Ranger, stiffened. The dog's ears shot up, his breath turning to steam in the frozen air, eyes locked on the tree-line as if something ancient was watching them back. Ethan had faced gunfire in deserts and jungles. He had led missions no one would ever hear about. But standing there, alone on a snow-choked mountain in Montana, staring at a stain no bigger than his hand, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. If you believe in kindness, redemption, and second chances, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because they remind us that even the coldest places can hide warmth. The cabin had belonged to a man Ethan barely knew, his estranged uncle, Samuel Cole. A recluse. A widower. A man who had cut himself off from the world after tragedy hollowed him out. When the lawyer had called months ago to inform Ethan of the inheritance, he almost declined. He was still adjusting to civilian life after leaving the Navy SEALs. His body had healed. His mind hadn't. Sleep came in fragments. Loud noises turned his muscles to wire. Crowded rooms suffocated him. Ranger, once his operational K-9 partner, now served as his lifeline. The dog knew when Ethan's pulse spiked. He knew when to press close, grounding him back into the present. The cabin, perched on a remote ridge overlooking miles of jagged white peaks, felt like exile at first. The road up was nearly impassable, and Ethan had to finish the last stretch on foot, hauling supplies on a sled while snow bit at his cheeks. The place smelled of pine, old smoke, and loneliness. Inside, the cabin was simple. A stone fireplace. Rough-hewn beams. Shelves lined with books about wildlife, mountain survival, and Native American history. A faded photograph hung over the mantel, a younger Samuel Cole standing beside a native elder and a carved wooden totem. Ethan stared at that photo longer than he meant to. Ranger began pacing. The bloodstain outside wasn't the only thing unsettling him. For 3 nights in a row, Ranger had woken before dawn, pacing near the door, low growls vibrating in his chest. Not the alert bark of a trained patrol dog. Something deeper. Something instinctive. On the 4th morning, Ethan followed him. The snow was waist-deep beyond the immediate clearing. Ranger moved with purpose, nose low, tail rigid, leading Ethan toward a grove of ancient pines behind the cabin. The wind carried a faint metallic scent. They found the source beneath a shallow drift. A leather satchel. It was half frozen into the earth, the snow around it stained the same rusty brown Ethan had seen on his first day. His pulse thudded in his ears as he knelt, brushing snow aside with gloved hands. The leather was cracked but intact, secured with a brass buckle etched with unfamiliar symbols. Ranger whined softly. Ethan hesitated. He had breached doors under fire without blinking. But something about this felt sacred. Private. He unlatched the buckle. Inside were bones. Small ones. Delicate. Wrapped carefully in cloth embroidered with patterns Ethan recognized from the photograph over the mantel. There was also a journal, thick and weathered, and a carved wooden medallion bearing the same symbol as the buckle. Ethan's stomach twisted. He carried the satchel back to the cabin in silence. Snow began to fall harder, thick flakes swirling like ash. By the time he reached the door, he felt as though the mountain itself had shifted. He lit a fire and opened the journal. The handwriting was his uncle's, tight, controlled, deliberate. The entries began 20 years earlier. Samuel had written about a friendship with a local Blackfeet elder named Joseph Red Elk. About the history of the land beneath the cabin. How it was once a sacred winter refuge for the tribe, a place where children were brought during harsh storms to be protected by the spirit of the white wolf. Ethan read late into the night. The journal revealed that decades ago, during a brutal blizzard, a young tribal girl had gone missing near the ridge. A search party never found her. The mountain had swallowed her whole. Until Samuel had discovered remains years later while clearing snow behind the cabin. He hadn't reported it. Instead, consumed by guilt and superstition, Samuel believed the bones belonged to the lost girl and that the mountain had entrusted him with something sacred. He had wrapped them in traditional cloth given to him by Joseph Red Elk and planned to return them to the tribe when he felt worthy. He never did. The final entry ended abruptly 2 weeks before Samuel's death. The last line read, "I hear her in the wind. It's time to make this right." Ethan closed the journal, his throat tight. He understood guilt. He understood carrying ghosts. The next morning, he drove down the mountain for the first time since arriving. The nearest town was small, tucked into the valley like a forgotten memory. After several awkward inquiries, he found the cultural center of the Blackfeet tribe. An older woman greeted him with cautious eyes. Ethan didn't know how to explain. He wasn't good with words outside mission briefings. But he laid the satchel gently on the table between them and stepped back. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Silence filled the room. Then tears. The remains were not the lost girls. They were older. Much older. The woman explained that decades ago, construction companies had begun encroaching on sacred land near the ridge. There had been protests. Legal battles. Bones of ancestors were rumored to have been disturbed and scattered. Many were never recovered. "Your uncle kept them safe," she told Ethan softly. "He was waiting for someone brave enough to bring them home." The weight in Ethan's chest shifted. He hadn't expected forgiveness. He hadn't expected gratitude. But he was invited to attend a small ceremony to return the remains to the earth properly. The ceremony took place at dusk. The tribe gathered in a clearing where the snow had been brushed aside. A fire crackled in the center. The mountains glowed pink under the setting sun. Ranger stayed close to Ethan's side. As prayers were spoken in a language older than the cabin, older than the nation, Ethan felt something break inside him, not in pain, but in release. For years, he had buried memories of fallen teammates, of missions that ended in loss. He had never allowed himself ritual. Never allowed himself to grieve fully. Watching the remains lowered into the ground with reverence, he understood what his uncle had failed to do. You cannot heal what you refuse to face. After the ceremony, the elder approached Ethan. He told him the mountain did not curse those who protected it. It remembered them. Winter deepened. Ethan returned to the cabin changed, though he couldn't explain how. He began repairing the structure with new purpose, fixing the sagging porch, sealing drafts, clearing a wider path through the snow. Ranger no longer growled at night. Instead, he slept peacefully by the fire. But one stormy evening, as wind battered the windows and snow erased the world beyond the glass, Ethan heard something. A knock. Impossible. No one could make that climb in this weather. He opened the door to find a woman and a young girl standing on the porch, half frozen, their car apparently stuck miles down the road. The woman's eyes were fierce despite exhaustion. The little girl clutched her hand tightly, pink hat dusted with snow. Ethan didn't hesitate. He ushered them inside, wrapped them in blankets, set water to boil. Ranger approached gently, tail wagging, nudging the girl's hand until she managed a small smile. Over the next 2 days, the storm trapped them together. Ethan learned the woman's name was Claire. She had been driving through the mountains to start over somewhere new, leaving behind a life that had crumbled under betrayal and financial ruin. She hadn't planned to break down near an isolated cabin owned by a former Navy SEAL with haunted eyes. But life rarely follows plans. Ethan found himself talking more than he had in years. Not about classified missions, but about fear. About feeling unmoored after service. Claire listened without judgment. The girl, Lily, followed Ranger everywhere, her laughter slowly filling the wooden walls with warmth that had been absent for decades. When the storm cleared and Ethan drove them to retrieve their car, Claire hesitated before leaving. She told him the cabin didn't feel lonely anymore. Weeks passed. Claire and Lily returned, this time intentionally. They brought groceries. Seeds for spring. Paint to brighten the dull interior walls. The cabin began to transform, not into something modern or flashy, but into something alive. Ethan started volunteering with the tribe, helping repair fences and haul supplies during winter. Ranger became a favorite among the children, a living reminder that strength and gentleness can exist in the same body. The bloodstain in the snow faded as winter surrendered to spring. In its place, wildflowers emerged. One evening, standing on the ridge with Ranger at his side and Claire's hand in his, Ethan realized the sacred secret buried in the snow had never just been bones. It was responsibility. It was reconciliation. It was the understanding that healing requires action. His uncle had hidden from the weight of his discovery. Ethan had chosen to carry it forward. If this story touched your heart in any way, please like the video and share it with someone who believes in redemption. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment the word hope below if you believe even the coldest winters can lead to spring. Because they can. The mountains still howled at night. The wind still carved ice along the eaves. But inside the cabin, there was laughter. There was community. There was purpose. Ethan no longer woke to ghosts clawing at his mind. When memories surfaced, he honored them instead of burying them. He had learned from a sacred lesson beneath the snow: some secrets are not meant to be hidden. They are meant to guide us back to who we are. Ranger lay at the doorway, watching the horizon as he always had on missions, vigilant but calm. Not searching for enemies now, but guarding something far more precious. A home. And as spring sunlight spilled across the ridge, melting the last stubborn patches of ice, Ethan understood that inheritance is not always about property. Sometimes, it is about unfinished stories waiting for someone brave enough to complete them. The mountain remembered. And now, so did he.